Hi, it's Mike Tom back for Mission Fest week. Mission Fest just around the corner now in Winnipeg. Your chance to hear not only great speakers, but come together and worship and check out some different breakout sessions as well. One of those sessions is being presented by Dr. Mark Jonah. He's the program director for the Music and Worship Arts program at Prairie College in Three Hills, Alberta. Really interesting conversation that you'll be leading through at your breakout session, Dr. Jonah, all about the connection between our worship service and God's mission. I am intrigued. Tell me a little bit about what you're exploring.
Well, what we're going to do in the session is really try to separate at the beginning, separate those two things and define what we're talking about. So what is worship? How should we think about the worship service? And so I'll be providing some just a broad outline of what is true worship and what is characteristic of true worship. And there's be three things that we're going to talk about. We'll look at maybe one definition of worship and kind of how that should inform us about how we come to worship. And then also talk about the mission of God. What is God up to in the world? And what is the connection between when we come to worship and then we go out into the world? And so I'm very interested in exploring that kind of idea that we may think that we come to church to, take care of ourselves and to grow and to learn. And that is all part of it. But then is there a disconnect between as we leave the service between what we've just done and what we're going to do for the other 167 hours of the week? Right. So it's exploring that kind of option. And then what do we do as leaders in worship or planners of worship or people who help lead the service as the congregation goes, as we are about to finish the service? What should we be saying to people, and what should that ending kind of look like as we go?
Okay, that's why it intrigued me, because when I was a pastor, when I was a youth and associate pastor, the lead pastor, he'd often give the benediction. And then after he gave the benediction, he would often say, "Our worship has ended. Our service begins," because so often we view it as a worship service, right? But there was that great reminder of sending to go and do now, I guess.
Yes, yes. And in fact, you've just hit upon one of the things that we're going to talk about as we
Nice.
define those big topics of worship. One of them is service. And it's not only, when we leave the worship service, but it's also inside the worship service that we have come to serve. And who are we coming before? And so we'll have some of those sorts of dialogues, and there'll be time for questions as well that people may have.
I really like that, because so often I'm just as guilty as anybody at doing this. I go to church to get fed, like you had mentioned earlier. And I don't
Sure.
know. When I was a pastor, I guess I viewed it as mission because I was telling people about the good news of Jesus, right? But now that I'm just a radio DJ, I view going to church as part of the mission of God. And honestly, I don't know if I have viewed it that way.
Right, right. And that's not unusual. I mean, of course, we want to go to church to relate to other believers and to be fed, encouragement, edification, all those sorts of things. But we are also coming before God. So how does that inform what we do and how we think about, as we gather and then as we scatter, as we leave?
I'm really intrigued. I think we'll see. I'm hoping I have time to actually go into the breakout sessions when I'm there this weekend. Definitely one that I want to check out, and maybe have you on a podcast one day talking about Christian radio as mission. I think would be kind of interesting too. So
Sure. No, I'd love to do that.
Tell us a little bit about, we've talked about the session. Is Prairie going to have anything there as well? Like, do you have a booth at Mission Fest this week, or places that we can find you around the weekend?
Sure, absolutely. Well, we are going to have a booth there. We have one of our representatives also coming out. And so we'll be set up in the booth area. So we invite everyone to come out and check out the options at Prairie College. We're celebrating our 100th anniversary this year. And
Wow.
so we've got 4 days planned in July. So it'd be a great time for people to come out, get a little vacation, see the mountains, and then check us out as well.
I'm guessing a lot of alum probably here in southern Manitoba too. I know a few people personally that had gone to Prairie years ago. So congrats on the 100 years, and looking forward to seeing you at Mission Fest this weekend. Anything else you wanted to mention before we let you go, Dr. Jonah?
Well, I would just encourage, if you've got an interest in the worship service of the church, whether you are on a worship team or you're in the band or you're just someone in the congregation, come along. We're going to have a great conversation together. And I, in situations like this, I say worship is an art, not a science. And so it's not like we've come to, here's the formula.
Mm.
But, I hope from my experience that people will learn from my experience, but I also intend to learn from the people who come and as we converse together.
Sounds like a great conversation to be a part of. Thank you so much. Hope to see you in person there this weekend.
Excellent. Thanks so much.